Hello, this is the third day of Holy Week, and once again I want to focus on an incident that occurred with Jesus in the temple. That final week, when Jesus entered Jerusalem riding on a donkey, he went into the temple and caused quite an uproar by his symbolic act of cleansing the temple. He and his little band of friends spent the night about 2 miles away in Bethany, but returned every day to the temple to teach, and the people hung on his words. It was there that the religious leaders, offended by Jesus' audacity, interrogated him every chance they could get. I'm sure that the people looked on with amusement as their leaders tried to trip Jesus up. What is he going to say? But Jesus cleverly evaded their questions and turned the tables on them and silenced his detractors. This must have gotten under their skin as this sort of country bumpkin from Galilee, this hillbilly from Podunk town of Nazareth. I mean, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? Well, he was besting them in the debates, and he humiliated them publicly. That didn't make him any friends there. It was in the temple that Jesus let fly in chapter 23 a salvo of denunciations against the hypocrisy of the religious leaders for their overbearing and meticulous religious practices, scrupulously emphasizing minor points in their quest for purity, while omitting the major concerns that would be more of a concern of God: justice and mercy and faith. And Jesus let them have it. Jesus didn't mince words. Read chapter 3 of Matthew to find out how religious abuse really riled Jesus up. He said that these leaders do everything just to be admired, just to be noticed. They strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. Jesus called them out in his diatribe. It was a real tour de force of spot-on denunciations. But it wasn't that he hated them. He saw how their leadership style, what they said, how they lived, it detracted from God's concerns. Their legalism insulated people from God. And the abuse of the temple and merchandising of the temple was cutting off God's purposes for the temple to be a house of prayer for all people to find God. Jesus could decipher their addiction and their need and love of praise and popularity and the need to be admired. He saw that as distorting religion. Sometimes religion gets in God's way and turns people off. As a person that works in the church, I'm very aware that the church makes many mistakes, and sometimes people are turned not away from God, but what they see done in God's name. At any rate, as his parting shot before he left the temple that day, Jesus, with a sigh, uttered these wonderful words: "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who were sent to you, how often I wanted to gather your people together, just like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. But you didn't want that. And look, your house is left to you deserted. I tell you, you won't see me until you say blessings on the one who comes in the Lord's name." What was all this about? I believe Jesus' heart was broken. He could see what they could not, that the way they were going would eventually lead them into direct conflict with imperial Rome, because they were rejecting the way of peace, the way of love of neighbor and even of an enemy. And Jesus wept over Jerusalem with those words, with deep grief, because, as he said, their house, the temple, would be abandoned, desolate, and the people would be broken and scattered. It was his people, the people of his heart. I believe he uttered those words with a lump in his throat because he knew of the coming storm. And in this text, Jesus gave us one of the most beautiful images of God. God as a mother hen gathering her chicks together under her wings. It's a picture of maternal love. Love so strong that the mother would sacrifice herself for her children. Jesus had no problem applying both masculine and feminine images to God. He compared God to a father of 2 boys, both of whom brought him grief. But he also spoke of God as a woman diligently sweeping her house in search of that one lost coin. He could speak of God as a sower of good seed, but he could also speak of God as a baker woman kneading the right amount of yeast into her bread. This image of Jesus as a mother hen sacrificing herself is the very role Jesus would step into before the week was done. Like the other image of the Good Shepherd that offers his life for the sheep, this image brims with the love of God for us. This story reminds me of a story I heard in church when I was a child. It touched me, and I've thought about it all these years. A young boy named Jack was taken care of by his dad. Jack's mother had died when he was quite young, so he never really knew her, but he and his dad lived on a farm out in the country, nowhere near to town. But his dad had a problem. His dad was terribly scarred. He had been severely burned in a fire on his face and on his hands. Jack didn't know much about when or how this happened, but he was embarrassed by his dad's scarred face and scarred hands. They were off-putting to Jack. He hated having to go into town where some of the people stared at his dad's ugly disfigurements. One day on the farm, a brush fire swept across their farm, and they had to get the horse out of the barn. It was all they could do to get there and lead the cow out to safety. They threw open the doors of the chicken pen so the hens and the rooster could run away, and the barn soon burst into flames and collapsed with a crash. They were able to pump enough water around and stop the fire from reaching the house. That was good. They saved the house. They lost the barn and the chicken yard and most of the cornfield. The next day, Jack and his dad surveyed the damage and walked over the blackened grass and examined the charred ruins of what had been their barn and chicken yard. Jack spotted a scorched black clump of something lying in what had been the cornfield. He and his dad walked over to it, and his dad stooped down. They both looked. "What is it, Dad?" His dad said, Jack, was Henrietta the hen. She must have got caught in the fire and couldn't get away. And with a stick, Jack's dad poked at the carcass of the dead chicken, and suddenly they heard little peeps coming from underneath. Jack's dad took the stick and gently lifted the body of Henrietta and turned it over, and from underneath her charred wings emerged 7 little chicks, bright and yellow, all peeping. Jack, Henrietta hen, gathered her chicks under her wings to protect them from the fire. There was no escape, so Henrietta gave her life to save her chicks. Jack stared on rather somberly. "Jack," his dad said, "I never told you this, but when you were a tiny baby, our house caught on fire. Your mother died in that fire. She was trapped and couldn't get out, and the floor caved in around her. It was too late when I came running in from the field. I rushed into the house, went into the blazes looking for you. I thought you may still be alive. The smoke was so thick I could hardly see or breathe. I heard you still in the cradle in your room crying, and the room was ablaze, about to be completely consumed. I rushed through the burning hallway. I grabbed you up in my arms and shielded you as best as I could as I ran through the flames and the smoke until we were outside." Jack, that's how I got these scars. I know they're ugly and embarrassing, but to me they are scars of my love for you. Like Henrietta the hen, I would give my life to save yours. Tears welled up in Jack's eyes. He threw his arms around his dad. Never again would those scars appear as ugly to Jack. They were transformed into symbols of love, tokens of beauty. Jesus chose that rich metaphor of a hen gathering her chicks. He bids us come underneath his sheltering wings. The book of Psalms is full of that image of God. Psalm 36:7, "How precious is your steadfast love, O God! All people may take refuge in the shadow of your wings. Be merciful to me, O God, be merciful to me, for in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I will take refuge until the destroying storms pass by." Psalm 57:1. "Let me abide in your tent forever. Find refuge under the shelter of your wings." Psalm 61:4. Jesus bids us come. "Come unto me, all you who are tired, weary, burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn about me. I'm meek and lowly, and you will find rest for your soul." Amen.